The last few days have been very much learning by doing. I fitted the cylinder block all by myself. That took quite some time, about 3 hours, which you'll see in the video after this initial introduction. I made a few mistakes, which I corrected, and I've been very honest about how everything went, which you'll see after this. And I also fitted in the valves again, which was more difficult to fit them in than take them out. So it took me about 3 hours to put back in 8 valves. Of course, I don't have the right tools to do it, and in a previous video I showed you how I've done this. So it took a little bit longer than expected. I haven't fitted the cylinder head back on the cylinder block yet. That's because I'm missing a dowel pin, and I just ordered one from a Kawasaki dealer, and that should come in by the post, through the post, tomorrow or at the latest this Friday. So then I can finish this and start building up the rest of the engine. In the meantime, I've been also working on the front of the bike. As you can see here, the headlamp or headlight has been painted flat black, and the rim has been painted a sort of matte silver, and the turn signals have been painted flat black, and that fits along much better with the rest of the front of the bike. All the wiring has been done again and fitted into the headlight. So the front end is, I guess, finished for about 90%. There are a few little things I still have to do, and then that's finished. So the coming few days it's going to be working on the engine, finishing the engine, and also of course the gas tank and the rear fender. Welcome to a new video of the 1982 Kawasaki 750 Limited rebuild. As you might recall, the cylinder head has to go back onto the engine, and this is just a quick shot before I get started, so you can see that I've already lowered the base gasket onto the engine, and it may look filthy, but to be honest, it's completely smooth all the way around. There's nothing, you can feel absolutely nothing, so I'm actually quite satisfied with the surface. It could have been done a lot better, of course, but it's extremely smooth, and that's the main important thing here, so that the gasket sticks as well as possible to the engine. So I'm going to put a little bit of gasket sealant on now, and push down the gasket onto the base. Well, of course the nozzle broke off, and so I had to do it the old-fashioned way, and use my finger and actually put a film of silicone seal gasket onto the gasket. So now I'm going to push it down. Here we have a view of the new gasket, which I pressed down onto the base of the engine. Here you have the view. I pressed it down as best I possibly could, so I'm expecting that should be okay. Next step. Well, here we go again. As you might remember, I built a sort of contraption to hold on to the cylinder head so that I can guide through the cam chain, which I'll be doing now. And after that I have a new solution to slowly lower the cylinder head onto the engine. I'll get back. As you can see, I guided the cam chain back through the cylinder head. There we are, it's coming from the engine, hung up on a bungee cord from the ceiling of the shed, and now we can build a contraption to slowly lower the cylinder head onto the engine. Well, here you see the pistons. I have put 2 new cotton gloves under the first 2 pistons, because you never know what could happen, and I might break a piston ring, and I don't want it to fall into the engine. So that's been dealt with, and I've tried to be inventive, because I decided to do this by myself anyway, and I actually connected the cylinder head to a piece of rope, and the rope there, you see the cam chain tensioner going in between, and the rope is actually connected to my tripod, and if everything goes well I should be able to lower it slowly onto the pistons while I guide in the pistons. So let me at least take out this piece of wood now and the rag and slowly lower it on. I will oil the pistons and also the piston bores before I get started, and see how this goes. Well, that took some fiddling around. Finally, the center two are fitted in. So the piston heads, you know, I'm doing this by hand with the contraption I was mentioning, and that's working reasonably. 2 of the 4 are now sunk into the bore. So the middle 2, as you can see here, I did add a few blocks of wood just to keep the pistons straight, and the only thing is now I have to figure out how to get the outer 2 pistons into the bore. But 2 out of 4, and I've been working on it for quite some time already, so yeah, it's not the easiest task, that's for sure. So let me try and get in the other 2. Well, let me tell you what it feels like to hate yourself just for a moment and feel like a complete ass. You know, just the shot before, I had 2 pistons already in the cylinder bores, and I was feeling happy halfway there. And of course, things don't turn out the way they should when you do it for a first time. The cam chain tensioner on the back slipped out, and it was on the outside of the engine. And there's no way of getting that cam chain tensioner back in when the cylinder head is pushed down. So I had to take it out again. And now I'm just on the point that it's just hanging in there, this cam chain tensioner. So it gives me enough room at the bottom to guide these 2 pistons in again. Here you see the wooden blocks. So I'm going to do it again, and this time I'm going to make sure that the cam chain tensioner stays in. Here we go. Well, we're back where we started, or at least where we left off. The mid 2 pistons are back in the cylinder bores. Now I have to do the 2 outer ones yet, and you know, I recently screwed up because I forgot to put in the cam chain tensioner. So that one's been fitted back in, and you know, if you've done this once, believe me, the second time there are things that you will never forget again. But at least 2 out of 4 are in, so let's try and work out the outer 2. I'll get back. Well, here we are again. It's about 3 hours later, I would guess, and it's done. It's finished. It's back. I was able to do it all by myself, and this was one of the most difficult things that I was very anxious about. Also a very important step to make in the rebuild of your engine, but it worked out fine, and the cylinder head is back on the engine. So that's that. I'm happy, and now I'm going to put the valves and the valve seals back into the valve head and make the next step. The next step in the process of building up the engine again is putting back in the valves. As you can see here, we have the finished valve head, and it's all been cleaned out with high pressure air and a rag, so it's all clean on the inside. Here I have in separate bags all the valves and the springs that I took out, and they've all been numbered which one it is. Here we have some additional parts, also the new exhaust rings, the new valve seals, the shims of course, and I'm going to be doing this again with the same tools that I've done before, and a little bit of oil of course for the stem of the valves. So I'm going to get started. 8 to go, and when it's finished we can put it back on the engine. Well, after exactly 1 hour I got the 4 exhaust valves back in. The first one, because I had to get used to it again, took me half an hour, and the other 3 took me about 10 minutes apiece. So here are the 4 exhaust valves, and now I'm going to do the 4 intake valves. Well, that's another job done. All 8 valves are back into the valve head. One thing I can say though, it's much easier to take them out than to put them back in. I started this morning at 10 o'clock and it's now exactly 1 o'clock, so it's taken me 3 hours to put back in 8 valves. And I think the main issue is because I didn't have the right tool, and in an earlier video I showed you how I took the valves out with the tools I had, and I did it in the same manner again, putting them back in again. And that was much more difficult. But I'm not complaining. It's finished. It's ready to put back onto the engine.